Welcome to Tales of Tatterdemalion in the world of Old Skull. Classic weird adventure tales of sword and sorcery await. In this visual storytelling saga, we explore the gothic realms of Cthulhu, Conan, Dracula, the Jabberwock, the King in Yellow, the Queen of Hearts, and the ever-perilous Dreamlands. So put on your headphones, brew some coffee, summon your familiar, and listen to the rain. Not all who wander are lost. We ramble on. The Tower of the Elephant by Robert E. Howard. A Tale of Conan the Barbarian. Part 2. The lurid lights and drunken revelry fell away behind the Cimmerian. He had discarded his torn tunic and walked through the night naked except for a loincloth and his high-strapped sandals. He moved with the supple ease of a great tiger, his steely muscles rippling under his brown skin. He had entered the part of the city reserved for the temples. On all sides of him they glittered white in the starlight. Snowy marble pillars and golden domes and silver arches, shrines of Zamora's myriad strange gods. He did not trouble his head about them. He knew that Zamora's religion, like all things of a civilized, long-settled people, was intricate and complex, and had lost most of the pristine essence in a maze of formulas and rituals. He had squatted for hours in the courtyards of the philosophers, listening to the arguments of theologians and teachers, and come away in a haze of bewilderment, sure of only one thing, and that they were all touched in the head. His gods were simple and understandable. Crom was their chief, and he lived on a great mountain, whence he sent forth dooms and death. It was useless to call on Crom, because he was a gloomy, savage god, and he hated weaklings. But he gave a man courage at birth, and the will and might to kill his enemies, which, in the Cimmerian's mind, was all any god should be expected to do. His sandaled feet made no sound on the gleaming pavement. No watchman passed, for even the thieves of the mall shunned the temples, where strange dooms had been known to fall on violators. Ahead of him he saw, looming against the sky, the Tower of the Elephant. He mused, wondering why it was so named. No one seemed to know. He had never seen an elephant, but he vaguely understood that it was a monstrous animal with a tail in front as well as behind. This a wandering Shemite had told him, swearing that he had seen such beasts by the thousands in the country of the Hyrcanians. But all men knew what liars were the men of Shem. At any rate, there were no elephants in Zamora. The shimmering shaft of the tower rose frostily in the stars. In the sunlight it shone so dazzlingly that few could bear its glare, and men said it was built of silver. It was round, a slim, perfect cylinder, 150 feet in height, and its rim glittered in the starlight with the great jewels which crusted it. The tower stood among the waving exotic trees of a garden raised high above the general level of the city. A high wall enclosed this garden, and outside the wall was a lower level, likewise enclosed by a wall. No lights shone forth. There seemed to be no windows in the tower, at least not above the level of the inner wall. Only the gems high above sparkled frostily in the starlight. Shrubbery grew thick outside the lower or outer wall. The Cimmerian crept close and stood beside the barrier, measuring it with his eye. It was high, but he could leap and catch the coping with his fingers. Then it would be child's play to swing himself up and over, and he did not doubt that he could pass the inner wall in the same manner. But he hesitated at the thought, of the strange perils which were said to await within. These people were strange and mysterious to him. They were not of his kind, not even of the same blood as the more westerly Brythunians, Nemedians, Kothians, and Aquilonians, whose civilized mysteries had awed him in times past. The people of Zamora were very ancient, and, from what he had seen of them, very evil. He thought of Yara, the high priest, who worked strange dooms from this jeweled tower, and the Cimmerian's hair prickled as he remembered a tale told by a drunken page of the court. How Yara had laughed in the face of a hostile prince and held up a glowing evil gem before him, and how rays shot blindingly from that unholy jewel to envelop the prince, who screamed and fell down and shrank to a withered, blackened lump that changed to a black spider which scampered wildly about the chamber until Yara set his heel upon it. Yara came not often from his tower of magic, and always to work evil on some man or some nation. The king of Zamora feared him more than he feared death, and kept himself drunk all the time, because that fear was more than he could ever endure sober. Yara was very old, centuries old, men said, and added that he would live forever, because of the magic of his gem, which men called the heart of the elephant, for no better reason than they named his hold the elephant's tower. The Cimmerian, engrossed in these thoughts, shrank quickly against the wall. Within the garden, someone was passing. He walked with a measured stride. The listener heard the clink of steel. So, after all, a guard did pace those gardens. The Cimmerian waited, expected to hear him pass again on the next round, but silence rested over the mysterious gardens. At last, curiosity overcame Conan. Leaping lightly, he grasped the wall and swung himself up to the top with one arm. Lying flat on the broad coping, he looked down into the wide space between the walls. No shrubbery grew near him, though he saw some carefully trimmed bushes near the inner wall. The starlight fell on the even sward, and somewhere a fountain tinkled. The Cimmerian cautiously lowered himself down on the inside and drew his sword, staring about him. He was shaken by the nervousness of the wild at standing thus unprotected in the naked starlight, and he moved lightly around the curve of the wall, hugging its shadow, until he was even with the shrubbery he had noticed. Then he ran quickly toward it, crouchingly low, and almost tripped over a form that lay crumpled near the edges of the bushes. A quick look to right and left showed him no enemy in sight, at least, and he bent close to investigate. His keen eyes, even in the dim starlight, showed him a strongly built man in the silvered armor and crested helmet of the Zamorian royal guard. A shield and a spear lay near him, and it took but an instant's examination to show that he had been strangled. The barbarian glanced about uneasily. He knew that this man must be the guard he had heard pass his hiding place by the wall. Only a short time had passed, yet in that interval nameless hands had reached out of the dark and choked out the soldier's life. Straining his eyes in the gloom, Conan saw a hint of motion through the shrubs near the wall. Thither he glided, gripping his sword. He made no more noise than a panther stealing through the night, yet the man he was stalking still heard. The Cimmerian had a dim glimpse of a huge bulk close to the wall. He felt relief that it was at least human. Then that fellow wheeled quickly with a gasp that sounded like panic, made the first motion of a forward plunge, hands clutching, then recoiled as the Cimmerian's blade caught the starlight. For a tense instant, neither man spoke, standing ready for anything. You are no soldier, hissed the stranger at last. You are a thief, like myself. And who are you? Asked the Cimmerian in a suspicious whisper. I? Taurus, of Nemedia. The Cimmerian lowered his sword. I've heard of you. Men call you a prince of thieves. A low laugh answered this. Taurus was tall as the Cimmerian and heavier. He was big-bellied and fat, but his every movement betokened a subtle dynamic magnetism, which was reflected in the keen eyes that glinted vitally even in the starlight. He was barefooted and carried a coil of what looked like a thin, strong rope knotted at regular intervals. Who are you? He whispered. Conan, a Cimmerian, answered the other. I came seeking a way to steal Yara's jewel, that men call the elephant's heart. Conan sensed the man's great belly shaking in laughter, but it was not derisive. By Bel, god of thieves, hissed Taurus. I had thought only myself had courage to attempt that poaching. These Amorians call themselves thieves. Bah! Conan, I like your grit. I never shared an adventure with anyone, but by Bel, we'll attempt this together, if you're willing. Then you are after the gem too? What else? Taurus responded. I've had my plans laid for months, but you, I think, have acted on sudden impulse, my friend. Conan frowned. You killed the soldier? Of course, Taurus answered. I slid over the wall when he was on the other side of the garden. I hid in the bushes. He heard me, or thought he heard something. When he came blundering over, it was no trick at all to get behind him and suddenly grip his neck and choke out his fool life. He was like most men, half blind in the dark. A good thief should have eyes like a cat. You made one mistake, said Conan. Taurus's eyes flashed angrily. I? I a mistake? Impossible. Conan said, You should have dragged the body into the bushes. Ah, Taurus sighed. So said the novice to the master of the art. They will not change the guard until past midnight. Should any come searching for him now and find his body, they would flee at once to Yara, bellowing the news, and give us time to escape. Were they not to find it, they'd go beating up the bushes and catch us like rats in a trap. You are right, agreed Conan. So, Taurus said, now attend. We waste time in this cursed discussion. There are no guards in the inner garden. Human guards, I mean, though there are sentinels even more deadly. It was their presence which baffled me for so long, but I finally discovered a way to circumvent them. Conan asked, What of the soldiers in the lower part of the tower? Taurus responded, Old Yara dwells in the chambers above. By that route will he come, and go, I hope. Never mind asking me how. I have arranged a way. We will steal down through the top of the tower and strangle old Yara before he can cast any of his accursed spells on us. At least we'll try. It's the chance of being turned into a spider or a toad against the wealth and power of the world. All good thieves must know how to take risks. I'll go as far as any man, said Conan, slipping off his sandals. Then follow me. And, turning, Taurus leaped up, caught the wall, and drew himself up. The man's suppleness was amazing, considering his bulk. He seemed almost to glide up over the edge of the coping. Conan, impressed, followed him, and lying flat on the broad top, they spoke to one another in wary whispers. I see no light, Conan muttered. The lower part of the tower seemed much like that portion visible from outside the garden, a perfect, gleaming cylinder with no apparent openings. There are cleverly constructed doors and windows, answered Taurus, but they are all closed. The soldiers breathe air that comes from above. The garden was a vague pool of shadows, where feathery bushes and low spreading trees waved darkly in the starlight. Conan's wary soul felt the aura of waiting menace that brooded over it. He felt the burning glare of unseen eyes, and he caught a subtle scent that made the short hairs on his neck instinctively bristle as a hunting dog bristles at the scent of an ancient enemy. "Follow me," whispered Taurus. "Keep behind me, if you value your life." Taking what looked like a copper tube from his girdle, the Nemedian dropped lightly to the sward inside the wall. Conan was close behind him, sword at the ready, but Taurus pushed him back, close to the wall, and showed no inclination to advance himself. His whole attitude was of tense expectancy, and his gaze, like Conan's, was fixed on the shadowy mass of shrubbery a few yards away. This shrubbery was shaken, although the breeze had died down. Then two great eyes blazed from the waving shadows, and behind them other, more sparks of fire glinted in the darkness. "Lions," muttered Conan. "Aye," said Taurus. "By day they are kept in subterranean caverns below the tower. That's why there are no guards in this garden." Conan counted the eyes rapidly. 5 lions in sight, maybe more back in the bushes. "They'll charge in a moment. Be silent," hissed Taurus, interrupting him, and he moved out from the wall, cautiously, as if treading on razors, and he lifted the slender tube. Low rumblings rose from the shadows, and the blazing eyes moved forward. Conan could sense the great slavering jaws, the tufted tails lashing tawny sides. The air grew tense. The Cimmerian gripped his sword, expecting the charge and the irresistible hurtling of giant leonine bodies. Then Taurus brought the mouth of the tube to his lips, and he blew powerfully. A long jet of yellowish powder shot from the other end of the tube, and it billowed out instantly in a thick greenish-yellow cloud that settled over the shrubbery, blotting out the glaring eyes. Taurus ran back hastily to the wall. Conan glared at him without understanding. The thick cloud hid the shrubbery, and from it no sound came. "What is that mist?" the Cimmerian asked uneasily. "The mist is death," hissed Taurus the Nemedian. "If a wind springs up and blows it back upon us, we must flee over the wall. But no, the wind is still, and now it is dissipating. Wait until it vanishes entirely. To breathe it is death." Presently, only yellowish shreds hung ghostily in the air. Then the shreds were gone, and Taurus motioned his companion Conan forward. The 2 men stole forward toward the bushes, and then Conan gasped. Stretched out in the shadows lay 5 great tawny lion shapes, the fire of their grim eyes dimmed forever. A sweetish, cloying scent lingered in the atmosphere. "They died without a sound," muttered the Cimmerian. "Taurus, what was that powder?" "It was made from the black lotus, whose blossoms wave in the lost jungles of Kitai, where only the yellow-skulled priests of Yun dwell. Those blossoms strike dead any who smell of them." Conan knelt beside the great lion's forms, assuring himself that they were indeed beyond power of harm. He shook his head. The magic of the exotic lands was mysterious and terrible to the barbarians of the north. "Why can you not slay the soldiers in the tower in the same way with the Black Lotus?" he asked. "Because," Taurus answered, "that was all the powder I possessed. The obtaining of it was a feat which in itself was enough to make me famous among the thieves of the world. I stole it out of a caravan bound for Stygia, and I lifted it in its cloth of gold bag out of the coils of the great serpent which guarded it without awaking him. But come, in Bel's name, are we to waste the night in discussion?" Conan said nothing more. The two men glided through the shrubbery to the gleaming foot of the tower, and there, with a motion enjoining silence, Taurus unwound his knotted cord, on one end of which was a strong steel hook. Conan saw his plan, and asked no more questions as the Nemedian gripped the line a short distance below the attached hook, and began to swing it above his head. Conan laid his ear to the smooth wall, and he listened, but could hear nothing. Evidently, the soldiers within did not suspect the presence of intruders, who had made no more sound than the night wind blowing through the trees. But a strange nervousness was on the barbarian. Perhaps it was the lion smell, which was over everything. Taurus threw the line with a smooth, ripping motion of his mighty arm. The hook curved upward and inward in a peculiar manner hard to describe, and then it vanished over the jeweled rim. It apparently caught firmly, for cautious jerking and then hard pulling did not result in any slipping or giving. "Luck the first cast," murmured Taurus. It was Conan's savage instinct which made him wheel around suddenly, for the death that was upon them made no sound.